Hello and welcome to Aspects of Writing. I'm your host, James Kelly, and my co-hosts for today's show are Joyce K. Gatchenberger and Janet Corsi, and our guests are Paul Atreides and Pat Ritter. And the topic of the show is finding your niche, or niche. And Joyce, I'm going to let you start by introducing our first guest, which is Paul.
Yes, good afternoon or good morning if you're doing a remote with us, which we are doing.
Yeah, Pat's in Australia.
There you go. My name is Joyce K. Gatchenberger, and one of our guests today is Paul Atreides, and he is an author, a playwright, a theater critic, a former critic and columnist with the Las Vegas Review-Journal. He now writes for EatMoreArtVegas.com. His nonfiction work has appeared in a variety of periodicals. After doing a 2-year stint for Henderson Writers Group as a coordinator of the Las Vegas Writers Conference, he is now the president. He also served a 2-year term on the board of UNLV College of Fine Arts. The books in his World of Deadhead series of paranormal humor are currently available. Nathan's Clan of Deadheads, released by his publicist February of 2018. He had several short stories published in anthologies such as Patchwork Path. His 10-minute short play, Fusion, can be read on the New York September 11th Museum and Memorial Artistry Registry. Phallius, a 2-act comedy drama covering everything from circumcision to prostate cancer, enjoys sold-out performances wherever it's produced. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Joyce.
That's fantastic.
All right, and Jan, I'm going to let you introduce our next guest.
Well, our next guest for today's show is Pat Ritter. Pat lives down under in Australia, where he's penned over 24 books from the comfort of his ranch. Pat, I'm going to let you tell the whole world about you.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, this is our third time on this show, so I'm very privileged, I would say. And I thank everybody, Joyce too. My genre is historical fiction. I fell upon that by accident, really, because my grandmother was born in Cunnamulla, a town southwest of in Western Queensland, which is one of the states of Australia, in 1903. And what had happened was when she was 10 years old, her mother died giving birth to a young sister, and she had 4 sisters altogether. Yeah, this was 1910. And her father, whose name was Joe Ryan, he was the instigator of the Great Shearers' Strike in 1891 in Cunnamulla. And anyway, what had happened was he gave his kids away to the different families in Cunnamulla like a litter of pups. And my auntie Nellie, she ended up with her cousin in Warwick, and my grandmother never saw her again. So what I did after my grandmother passed away, I wrote a story and put it on my website, www.patritter.com.au. And one morning I received an email from this lady called Janet Pearson, and she said, I've been looking for you for 40 years. I'm Nellie's eldest daughter. And she was a similar age to myself, yeah, and quite out of the blue it was. So up to that time, I've written a number of books, about 10, I think, at that time. But I didn't really understand what genres were. I looked at all different types of genres. And all of a sudden, after this cousin of mine sent me all this information about my great-grandfather, I wrote a book called The Shearer. And I used him as the real character of the book, but I used fiction with it. So it sort of blended in historical fiction. And all of a sudden, that started a series called Outback Australia. And I'm now up to book number 24. So I'm writing, at the present I'm writing book number 25, called The Bush Detective. So they stories stand by themselves, but the characters continue into the next book, and yeah, I've had a lot of success with that. And that took me a long time to find that genre. And once I found it, I can't stop writing.
Well, what I like is the way you write. You write a page a day. Is that about right?
Yeah. Oh, you mean on my Facebook page?
Yes.
Yeah, I do. What happens on Facebook was when I don't know if you had it in America, but we had it here in Australia. When I was about 10-year-old, we had radio, which was serials and programs like
Right.
and Biggles and all that type of thing. And I remember when I was 10-year-old, us kids used to stick around the radio at 5 o'clock listening to this Biggles or the next series, next era.
Right.
And it come to mind when I started Facebook that I thought, what if I put a page from one of my books on, to read, get the readers get the readers to read it. See, so I've been doing that. It's gone up to 9,000 members.
Wow.
So and
That's a great following.
yeah. Anyway, so what happens is if I don't put that page on, there's a message comes, where's the page for today, and all this sort of thing. So I've got a book on there at the moment called The Proposition.
Yes.
And it's a story, and people are reading that, and it's quite interesting, really.
All right, so we are going to be talking about finding your niche, and it's interesting how we all go about doing it. So I'm going to ask Paul first. Paul, when did you start writing, and how did you discover what you wanted to write about, and how often have you changed genres?
I started writing when I lost my job in the economic downturn. So that
Okay.
was probably 2011 when I got laid off. And just didn't know what I was going to do with my time. So I started writing. And I don't know. Ghosts have always... yeah. But,
You've always been haunted.
yeah.
There you go, okay.
Yeah.
Haunting.
So I just, why not? So I started writing about ghosts.
Okay, all right. Is that the only thing you've written, though? Because you write plays and you write...
I write plays and I do essays, and I'm working on a novel now that's almost finished, done in 3 parts. It's kind of more along the lines of mystery, and no ghosts attached to it at all.
Okay, all right.
And what would you say your genre is, or your niche, or is it paranormal, or is it drama, or?
Wow. That's hard for me to pin down because I write across genres so much, and writing for the stage as well as for the written, for readers. That's tough for me to
Yeah,
pin
because you
down.
wrote magazine and newspaper articles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you constantly are changing what you're writing about.
pretty much.
How do you find... Does someone come to you and say, I want you to write this? Or how do you go about deciding what to write about?
When it comes to columns,
Yes.
and of course, the assignments come through for the theater reviews.
Okay.
The editor there says, okay, here's what we have coming up this month. Here's what I'd like you to go see, or which ones do you want to go see? And so those are assigned.
Okay.
But when I do like a column for them, it's certainly my choice.
Oh, okay.
What do I feel like writing about this time?
All right.
And I cover various aspects of the theater community, the arts community in Las Vegas.
Okay. All right. And Pat, you didn't start out writing historical fiction. Yours was strictly just something you were writing about yourself, really.
It's James. Yeah, I'd written about 6 or 7 books, and I got invited to the local library here to talk about writing. And when I was, there was about 50 people in the audience, and anyway, I put all my books out the front, showing what I'd written, and one of the people in the front of the seat said, "Are these all about you?" And I said, "Yeah, they are." And I didn't realise up to that point that they were. And he said, "Oh, well, all right, okay." So I went home and I thought about it, and I thought, well, all I've done is written about me, which is something, I suppose, but it's not what I really want to write about. And it took a little bit, like I said before, it took a bit of a trigger to find how fate intervened with meeting this cousin of mine and all of a sudden getting into the odd genre of historical fiction.
And when you say when you say you were writing about you, you didn't know at the time you were really writing about you. It was fiction,
No,
but you realized later on everything was based on
Yeah.
your life.
yeah, true stories, and I wrote my own memoirs and wrote, and all those type of things, But it was all about myself, and because that's been a bit vain, when you think about it. I never actually thought about it when I was doing it,
Yeah.
but it is vain.
Don't we all put some of ourselves into our writing?
We do.
Yes.
We do.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I put 100% of it in.
There you go. There
He
you
just
go.
changed the name.
When I look back now, particularly this book I put on Facebook every day, I think, oh my God, I remember doing all that. So, although it's a different character, it's still me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something. I think that's a journey that we take. Like I've been doing this for 30 years, and when I first started, never did I ever think that I'd be at this point in my life, having book number 25 just about
I
done.
know.
Yeah.
That's quite an accomplishment.
So it sounds like you're saying that you are changing the name to protect the innocent in the book proposition.
Yeah, I suppose so. What happens is when people ask me a comment on Facebook, I revert back and say, yeah, I did that.
Cop to it. Always cop to it, Pat.
There you go. There you go.
Quicksilver, they think that the character is Bundy Quicksilver, and they think he's the one that's doing it. But it's actually me.
There you go.
And I suppose it's authentic. You can't sort of. You can believe what you read, I suppose.
Yeah, if you hear a little bit of breakup here and there, it's when we're laughing. We're interrupting his feed from Australia. So.
Oh, okay. Oops.
All right, so I want to ask a few questions, and anyone can answer. Joyce, Jan, Paul, Pat. Where do you find what you want to write about? We know, Pat, that you started writing out about yourself, and then it switched to historical fiction. So example is when you switched to historical fiction, I know the first part was about a relative. You've written 24 books, though. So where do you go to decide who I'm writing about next or what I'm writing about next?
All right, I'll give you an example of my present book. The present book I'm writing is called The Bush Detective. And at the beginning of this year, I looked on Google to find out what happened in Colomulla in around 1907. And I was surprised to find there was a murder committed there, a lady called Catherine Smith. And I thought, wow, this is doing me, because I was a detective for 15 years, and I thought, well, that'll fall into my place. But I couldn't put me as the character because I thought, I've put myself down as enough now. So I rang a friend of mine who I worked in the police with, Alan Honor, and I asked him if he'd like to be the character in the book called Alan Honor. And he said, I'd be privileged to. I think it'd be wonderful. So I use his name as the detective, as the Bush Detective. He's the character rather than me. And it's because I know Alan so well, I use a lot of his idiosyncrasies.
Okay.
And he's a very bright and genius type of person. So I've got to twist things around a little bit to make it out more than what it was, So so I'm nearly finished chapter 5 in that one, and we just about solved the first murder. So it's getting pretty good.
So yours is basically based on research and real characters that existed when you're writing. You're really writing from some person's perspective.
Yeah, I got approval from the people who have got the copyright on the article, and then they gave me permission to use the information. And now what I do is I write the story using Alan as the Bush Detective, the main character, and also how he solves the murder. And then all of a sudden I've also got his wife involved too, because I asked her if she wanted to be in it. She said, yeah, I'd love to be in it. So anyway, she was in it. And anyway, so she's the victim's daughter. So I've got her involved too, which is nothing to do with the story as in reality, but it's the fictional side of it.
Okay.
To make it interesting.
So Paul, when you're writing, do you work the same way, or how are your characters developed?
The overall for even the play Fallacies that started out writing about men's issues One of the things that I really wanted to do was address things that people don't like to admit to or talk about.
Okay.
One of those things happened to be the fact that men can be and are victims of domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to read all three of my paranormal books, the underlying issue for all three books is domestic violence.
Oh.
The current work in progress is about a man who was terribly abused as a child by his grandfather, jumps from that into a relationship with a woman who abuses him. He goes into therapy, but while he's in therapy, his therapist suggests that he start a journal. Write it all down, get it all out of his system so he can go on to a normal life. So he starts his journal. The journal ends up in the hands of a publisher. It gets published, and people go crazy.
Yeah, I would think.
Well, this is a good lead into Joyce.
So,
Yeah.
so he hides. He disappears, kind of like Salinger. And this therapist decides she needs to find him. She needs to find out, did she fail as a therapist, or did he run off and commit suicide, or did some rabid fan come kill him? So then part 2 goes looking for him. I'm going to kind of sort of give it away. Part 3, she has found him hiding out in a very, very private shelter, and she works with him again to see if she can fix.
You know, Joyce writes historical fiction, but hers is based on true story as well. Now, you
Yes.
just had a third book come out.
Yes, I did. It's called something. Well, I'll have you look it up on Amazon. I'm listed as Joyce K. Gatchenberger. That's my publishing name.
You might want to tell them the title of the book.
I want to have
Yeah.
a little mystery here. You know, we're bearing all. It's called Ripples in the Generation, and it talks about the continuing saga of the Henry family. But the first book was based on real life. It was called Lines of Listening.
Right.
It was about my journey through my personal family growing up. And in writing the book, I talked to my family members and let them know I was going to publish it. And I read to them the portions of the book that was about they themselves individually. And of course, it was emotional because I was raised in a very dysfunctional and abusive family. And when that occurs, you know, the children always carry the scars.
So it's generational abuse.
Yes, and all the things that go with that. And when the book was finally published, which they knew it was going to be, I was disowned by my family and am to this day.
And you're even
my.
talking about close family.
Yes, brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and they've made it quite clear in the actions that they've done after the book is published that that's the way they want to keep it.
Okay.
Well, see, I
Well,
kind
she-
of worry about that myself just a little bit, Joyce, because portions of the new work, there are things in there that are actual, real things that happened to me,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't specifically spell it out. I would have to say that should my brother and sister read the book,
Mm-hmm.
if it gets published,
Yes.
they will recognize those things.
But
Mhm,
Joyce was a little different in when she wrote her book, she actually mentioned the family.
Yes,
Um,
and I had read the portions
But they did
to
give her
them.
permission to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
I told them I was going to publish, and they knew what was going to be written.
Yeah.
And
And I know, Pat, when you started writing yours, you were going through your own, I guess, your mind demons or whatever, because your past was you had, I think you said you had been an alcoholic, and you know, part of those struggles were there as well.
Yeah. I think with myself, when I wrote my memoirs called Dream Angel, I'd already written 2 books for different people on their lives, and what was so strange was when I'd finished writing the final chapter, they both, and they didn't know one another. This was years apart. They both said they didn't want to publish it because they didn't want people to read what they'd open it to the public. And I because I said you can't do that. I said we've got a contract here and blah blah blah, you know. So anyway, I thought to myself, well, all right, well, I'll do this myself and see how I feel. So I sat down to write my memoirs, and because I'm an alcoholic, and so I had to write all about that and everything else. Anyway, but the big thing was I sat down with an A4 sheet of paper and I put it landscape, and I started off at the present, and I went back and I put little bubbles, writing ideas that come to my mind. And in actual fact, I wrote my whole life on this A4 sheet of paper. And when I'd actually got in and started writing the book, I found it so easy to sort of look at the sheet of paper and say, oh, yeah, I remember that part, and I remember that, and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, but I've never really, all my relations know I was a drunk and everything, and what I'd gone through and all that, and how to recover. But I believe a lot in fate and destiny. When I left the police, I went and became an alcohol and drug counsellor. And by doing that, I worked there for 11 years, and I learned what happened to me to become an alcoholic. And when I discovered that, I thought, wow, like this should be sort of told to everybody, really, because I really had it was me that did it, but the problem was it was caused through consequences that it built me up to being a people pleaser. So I had, at 45 years of age, I had to change from being this people pleaser to a normal person. And through writing, I think this has helped me a lot, But when it comes to subjects like alcohol and all that, I can write very specific about what it feels like to get drunk and fall in the gutter and all that sort of stuff. But when to write now in this genre I'm writing in, it's a whole new challenge, because I'm going back to the 1907 in this particular year.
And you weren't alive then, were you?
No. Oh, that's funny. That's funny, James.
Sorry about that, Pat.
Still, I think it was the first year of the introduction of the horse, of the car. But, you got to sort of describe how you ride a horse and how you do all these types of things. And we sort of take a lot of things for granted today, what we got. And back in those days, there's no electricity, no sanitary, no nothing, and when you had a bath, you only bath once a week or once a month,
right,
depending on how you wanted to boil the water, in the copper. So they're the type of things that I enjoy researching and all that. But it's a lot of fun. Keeps me busy.
Yeah. And Jan, you didn't do a lot of research on yours necessarily for what you wrote, because yours it's not real, it's not true life.
Right. Right.
It is fictional, and yours
Right.
yours basically came from a premise of, I don't know, politics, I guess you could say.
Politics, right. A law that they were trying to undo, that I think needs to stay in place, but everybody has they have one thought on this particular situation, and it's about abortions. And people don't realize there are so many reasons for that. And so cutting off one person's hand, you're cutting off everybody else's head. So I wanted to create a scenario where people could understand that there's more than one way to look at this, and it needs to be addressed. But I didn't start writing until 2011 as well. And that was the first time I ever picked up a pen and wrote anything.
Wow.
So it's how interesting that we should both start at the same time.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I write all over the place. I write in so many different genres. And I actually started out writing something very dramatic as far as my first serious piece. And it was about a Mexican drug cartel. So that's about as serious as you can get. And
now, is that personal experience, are you saying?
I always say that it was not, but in reality, I think back, and when I started out in Las Vegas as a 21-year-old working in one of the hotels, I knew nothing about drugs, but I did encounter exactly that scenario. So when I say that it's not based on fact, I think back about it, and I remember walking into a room. I was a room service waiter, and walking into a room, and there was these stacks of white powder in bags on this table. They even offered, I had no idea what it was. I really did not know what it was. That's how naive I was. So there is a little bit of truth to it.
It was probably powdered sugar.
That's what it was. They were
Yes.
there on
Yeah.
a powdered sugar convention.
Yes.
Right.
And so, and then, but then when I started writing seriously, my first book was based on a dream, and it was government espionage, and it was the entire story was based on a dream. So and then I write children's stories. I write science fiction. So I just write whatever comes to mind.
Do you have an agent?
I've had agents. I don't have one now. No.
You don't have one now?
Hmm.
Last year at the conference, I approached several agents and said, okay, so I write across genre. If you like my work,
Mhm.
are you going to represent everything I write? Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then everything just kind of fell apart.
Yeah, usually
Yeah.
the agents want to pitch you in a specific genre. They don't like that you're all over the place, and I have experienced that.
Yeah.
Yes.
See,
Yeah.
and I think that's the problem. One of the problems of putting yourself in a niche. or
But
in
you
a
know what?
niche.
There is an author, Heather Graham, who writes romance, and her publisher did not want to publish anything other than romance because that's what she's very good at and does quite well in the literary market. So she decided to go out and self-publish. Basically, she has a subsidiary publisher, and she publishes horror because that's what she likes as well. So she publishes one house for the audience, the following that she has, and then she does what she wants as a self-published
Under the
author.
same pen name?
Under the same name, yes.
Yeah. Wow.
But I guess her publishing house, and she has a traditional publisher, they don't care because I guess they figure she can't market the way that they're marketing her romance.
Right, right.
So
Well,
Yeah.
that sounds like what Pat is doing. He's writing one book online, and then he's writing another book, which is a bush detective.
But Pat, isn't
Like-
that this? Don't you do the same thing though? The books that you present online, aren't they the ones you end up making a novel out of?
Yeah. Oh, that was one of my the book I put online and Facebook at the moment is The Proposition, but I eventually put them all on, as time goes on, because it takes sort of 6 months for the book to go through when they read a page a day.
Right.
But getting back to what you were talking before, I self-publish because my first book, we had a publisher. I co-wrote the first book, and we weren't making any money out of it. It was 50 cents a copy or something. We're lucky to sell 8,000 copies, But the thing was this: you had to try and ring them up to get money out of them. And anyway, so I decided to go alone and to self-publish. And this is way back before we had the internet and all that. I had to do things on coupons and send out letters on the mail and all that sort of thing, Whereas today with social media and with all the other things, we've got YouTube and that, people get to know who you are. And of course, you've got more writers out there too now with self-publishing with Smashwords and Amazon. And of course, the thing is, marketing is the key. And because I try to come up with new marketing ideas every day. A new idea I've used recently is that each of my books, I've made an attachment of the first chapter of the book to the title of it with the photo of it, and I attach that to every message that I get from people, so that way they can make their own choice, and they can read the first chapter, click onto the link to buy the book. And that seems to be working because since I've been doing it, well, my sales are doubled. So something must have happened there along the line,
How did it?
Every time,
How did it affect
that-
when you started marketing on your own? How did that affect your sales compared to what you were selling when you had the traditional publisher?
when I had the traditional publisher, I sold 4,000 books in 2 months.
Okay, that's
Which was
good.
which was excellent, really. But the big thing was, it was like a, something that I thought, well, how long's this been going on? I should have been doing this years before. But it was just the start of a new beginning for me because I had to learn everything. It's a mountain you've got to climb. It's something you just got to learn as you go along, and you do have your ups and downs. I think what happens is I set myself every year. I'd sit down and do a writing goal and I make sure I write a novel a year, and I go to a writers group, which we write 500 words each week on a topic that facilitator gives us, and I publish those as stories, and I put them together as stories. I give them away free. But the big thing is, I set the goal to write this novel every year, and the thing is, by doing that, it gives me a plan to do it. Now, with marketing, I market on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, all those types of social media. But what I've been doing lately with LinkedIn, which is good, more because you're getting more people across the world, like getting people from India. I sold books to Japan the other day, in which I didn't even realise that I had them in Japanese, but it was. I got, the books are written in 50 different languages. So I was surprised to sell one in Japan, and I sell a lot in America and a lot in Australia and that. But the thing is, I think what's most important is to set the goal and to achieve it by the end of the year, and to review what I've done the year before to see if I'm improving. And now what I look at is selling 2 books per day, so which has been happening. And so the more I market, the more, and I'll say something now, James, when you put this on YouTube, my sales increase overnight. So, whatever you do, and keep doing it, because you're doing well.
Thank you. You're welcome.
There you go. There you go.
That's an achievable goal, though, really.
Yes.
2 books a day.
2 a
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
Mhm.
2
And
books a day.
But that's good that you
what
don't set your goals higher, because
that's to sell 2 books a day, but that's to be consistent. Like you don't sell 2 books a day and don't sell for a week. It's got to be 2 books every day. And that's the consistency over the last 4 months.
Oh, well, now he
So
just
I'm
blew
happy.
me right out of the water.
And now, is this for each book or just for the newest book?
No, this is for all the books. Yeah. But there's one particular book sells more than the others. I wrote a book in 2007 on a prisoner of war who was prisoner of war in Changi in World War II, and what he'd done was he wrote a diary of every day he was in Changi, and he stole them out when the war finished. And I was lucky enough to write his story, and his life story is fact. It's fact, because he's an Australian, and he got through it all, and how he survived, and he lived till he was 102 and a half, and at 28 years old, to go through that atrocity, absolutely incredible story, and it just shows what you can do when adversity comes up to you, and you got to sort of climb the mountain and get over the other end.
So that book sells more than the others.
It sells more than the others. Yeah. And
What
the
is the
one
name
lady,
of that book, Pat?
His Life Worth Living.
His Life Worth Living.
It's George Burtonshaw's story. Yeah, His Life Worth Living. Yeah. And in actual fact, it's so strange. Where I live now, he used to own all this property, and so I don't know if that's something to do with fate or destiny or what it was, but I was meant to write his story. So it's sort of it's a true story and fact, because it's written at the time back in 1944, 42, and 43 and 44. So to read what he. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
To read what it was like when the war finished, because they'd already knew the war had ended, and yet they had 2 or 3 days still imprisoned by the Japanese to wait for the word to come through that they're surrendered. And so yeah, it's very, very heart-wrenching, a very good book. But it sells more than the others. It sells sort of 4 to 1.
Well, there's 2 things I want to bring up. One, I know that you said that your biggest audience is U.S. market.
Yep.
And
Biggest market, yeah.
The other thing I want to point out, because it doesn't matter where you are in the world, that you don't have to focus on the country you're living in. Your audience is everywhere, all over the world, with the internet the way it is today. So don't pigeonhole yourself. The other thing is how did you get your book in 50 different languages?
Well, because in Smashwords, when you publish in Smashwords as an ebook, it automatically goes out to 50 countries.
Oh, so
It gets
it's
you-
still in English. It's just that
Oh.
it's published in different.
Yeah, yeah. The things change. You know, I had to look at it in France, and it looks different to France and all that sort of thing. But in Amazon's the same. Amazon goes out to all those different countries also.
Yeah, and Drafted Digital
So-
does the same thing. If you publish in Drafted
Yeah.
Digital, it also is marketed all over the world in all the different
Yep.
countries.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a. I find by doing that, I got better self control of it, and also I can sort of guide my own destiny on where I'm going. And with your help with what you're doing here with authors and that, you know, this is astronomical, you know, because it goes out to so many people.
Yeah.
I'd like to see somebody. I don't know who it'll be. I wish I was smart, but I'm not. But take that ebook and make it into a movie type of YouTube. But some young bright spark will come up with it. You know, we'll get another, and that's what'll really happen. That'll blow media.
And you never know, Pat, who's listening. You never know who might get your book and read it. We've had authors who said that they had their work out there. They wrote a specific book, and someone from Hollywood called this one guy up. His name is Gerard Demergeny, and asked him if he'd be interested in writing for them in Hollywood. And he said, well, what is it? And he said, it's a Western. He goes, yes, but I write about terrorism. So how is that the same? And he goes, we just like your style. So you never know who might be reading and who's paying attention to it. It might just happen for you.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I'll give an example. Every morning on Facebook, I send out a birthday wish to the people who come up on Facebook, the friends on Facebook. And one of the ladies that I've known for some time, she's an author in America, well-known author. And anyway, I sent her a birthday wish. And what I do is attach my website so she can choose a free book from one of the stories that I've written.
Oh.
And so she sent back a message to me and said, thanks, Pat, for that. Now, you go to my Amazon page and choose what book you want, and I'll gift it to you, see? And I thought, oh, that's very nice of you, and I didn't ask for it, it just happened. So anyway, she sent me this book this morning that she's gifted to me, and all I got to do is download it to my Kindle. Now, what she's done is downloaded a book I wrote about my wife who I lost through cancer, and she said I'm reading that at the moment, and so I then sent her a PDF file of the follow-on book that I wrote from that called The Drover, and so she can read that. So you don't know what, like you say, James, you don't know who's listening or what's what, you know, and all that sort of thing. So yeah, they're the things I do daily, and it's fabulous the response I get from different people, and this is right across the world. You know, this is not just in my own backyard. This is right everywhere. You know, that's it.
Yeah.
We're gonna. But that's a mark.
Yeah. I'm going to let Paul speak for a minute because he's got a few things, and I don't want to leave it out here. So, Paul, why don't you tell us a couple of things you have coming up here?
Conference.
Okay.
Las Vegas Writers Conference, May 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. It's a damn good event, if I do say so myself.
And you do.
Well, and you just did. Yes.
I just did, didn't I?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have probably the biggest faculty this year that we've ever had before. And in the past, we've done our conference and then followed the conference up the next day with a special workshop. Last year, Jane Friedman did a full-day Sunday workshop for us. And this year, we've moved the workshop time to Thursday morning. And we have 4 people doing workshops for us this year. Mary Robinette Cowell is doing a workshop for us on short stories. She's received the Campbell Award for Best New Writer, 3 Hugo Awards, and Best Fantasy Novel. Chuck Sambucino, who most people will remember from Writer's Digest. He's a former staffer for Writer's Digest books. And we have Amy Collins. Talk about finding your niche.
Mm.
She's really good at helping people do that. And she's going to be talking about book marketing in her master class. And then we also have Brad Schreiber, who is going to be presenting on screenwriting. And he is probably one of the most well-respected script doctors in L.A., in Hollywood. So we've got some really good stuff going on with that, with the master classes. And, of course, the conference itself. And the prices went up this year. Yeah, we had to do that. Prices went up with that like it did with everything else.
Yeah.
But it's still a pretty good bargain because when you register for this conference, you get everything. You get your pitches to the agents. You get blue pencil time with the other authors. You get all the different panels. You get the keynote speeches during meals, and meals are included.
Wow.
Other conferences you go to, it's a la carte. You pay a basic fee, and then you have to add on this panel, or you have to add on that class, or you have to add on lunch, or you have to add on dinner. And with us, you don't do any of that. You pay the fee, and you attend everything that
It's
you
all
want to
inclusive.
attend. It's all inclusive.
Wow. Great
Well,
bargain.
when is this conference and where is it?
May 2nd, 3rd, and 4th at the Tuscany Hotel and Casino here in Las Vegas. It's like a half a mile off the strip.
Right. Yeah.
It's very convenient
I'm
to
there
get in and out
3 or
of.
4 times a week at least.
Yeah.
So it was
Come-
just there this morning.
And
Come
lovely
join us.
people.
You can find out all about it by logging on to LasVegasWritersConference.com.
Okay. All right. And I also want to share, since we're doing all this, Aspects of Writing is actually doing the second annual Aspects of Writing book launching and picnic. And that's going to be April 27th. Yes, go ahead.
I'm
Paul.
there.
You're there. That's
I'm
right.
there.
I'm there.
Actually,
I'm
everybody's
there.
there. Everyone's
Yeah.
going to be there.
Pat?
Come on, Pat. You're going to have to
Pat?
fly from
on,
Australia and
Pat.
come
Yeah.
join us.
Just fly in and then stay for the conference.
There you go. There you go.
Sure.
But what that is that we wanted to come up with a way for authors to get their new work out there. It's kind of like a book launching, but it's like a super book launching for all the authors. So we're hoping it's going to be a great event again this year. We had fun last year.
Yep.
So we're inviting everyone to please come out. That's, again, April 27th from 10 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon at 9708 or 9708 Gillespie Street off of Silverado Ranch in Las Vegas, 2 blocks south of, or east of the South Point.
Who volunteers to look up who the wind god is?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Oh.
We had that last year, the wind. You were there.
Yes.
Oh, my. But you guys had fun.
Oh, we did.
You were with Fred Rayworth, and I remember I kept saying, you guys, I apologize so much for the wind. They go, oh, this is the best part of it.
Holding
Holding down the tent.
Holding
Hold
your
down
book
the tent.
down. Yeah.
Now, we actually do have supports this year. We have concrete supports. So, all right. So we are talking about
Well,
finding your niche.
And I was going to mention 2 things that both of these guest authors had mentioned today was their trigger and how that got them started
Yeah.
into writing initially. Both Pat and Paul had mentioned it. And it seems like when you find your niche, it kind of motivates you or charges you or unsettles you, and you're saying, okay, now I'm going to write about this. Each one of them seemed to have had a trigger, and I guess I'd like both of them to kind of talk a little bit more about
Well,
that.
I have a specific question about that, too, because you had mentioned also, Paul, that you have written in several different genres.
Yeah.
So how do you know that if you start one, that's what you're going to stick with? Pat, I know you did because you found it works for you.
Yeah. Well, it gave me great ideas, and I think what it did for me, James, was that I could stick to a particular year and place and create the characters and create the story around it. And I think that's once that happened, I was on my way. But prior to that, I was sort of all over the place. Like I said, when I wrote all those stories about myself, yeah, that was good, but you can only write so much about that. But to get your niche like I have now with historical fiction, and not only that, I find it quite amazing that I go into Amazon and I look at the results of different authors, and I look at the historical fiction, historical fiction section of Amazon, and I'm sort of in the top 4,000 in the world, and I find that quite amazing.
Yeah.
I can't,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, I know, it's amazing, yeah, and yes, so it sort of kicks me along a bit too, you know, because someone's out there reading something of what I write.
But you know what's
So,
interesting too is he sits there on a farm, kind of in the outback. Is that correct?
Yep.
And
Yeah, west of
he's connected all over the world.
Yeah, yeah, everywhere. It's just, well, like this morning, you know, we connected up just to say hello
Yes,
and
yes.
make sure everything's working, and it's you know, you're millions of miles away from one another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
that's
cool.
it.
And what about you, Paul?
You know, triggers. I think it just really has to do with things that happen to people that we don't like to talk about. And now how I decide whether it's going to be a play or whether it's going to be a book or a short story or a novella just depends on how I see it playing out in my head. Because I come from a theater background, dialogue, and dialogue, even in a novel, has to move the story forward.
Yeah.
And when you're on stage, that's basically all you have is dialogue to move that forward. You and screenplays as well. You have to leave the other work to the actors and the director to decide what that's going to look like. So you're leaving out all of that descriptive. And I really, really enjoy being able to see if I can put an entire story down, an arc, and really get the point fully across with only dialogue. So I have a new play I've been working on called Sins of the Fathers. And it's about the Catholic abuse of children. And so that's been my goal with that, is to get that entire story out with nothing but dialogue.
Well, I'm so glad that you're hitting on the abuse of males, because that's something that is just lightly brushed over so much, and it needs to come to light, and nobody needs to be ashamed of what has happened to them.
Yeah. The biggest thing that still crops up, it's like, I don't know if you recall, but earlier this year, I believe it was, 2 men in the same week here in Las Vegas were victims of domestic violence.
Yeah.
And one of them, the woman said, I'm really sorry. It was just a mistake. It was an accident. And the police believed her.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the coroner kind of said, accidents don't leave a great big huge bruise on somebody's sternum because the hilt of the knife hit so hard.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we deal with law enforcement as well. They just don't buy into it.
Yeah.
And so I that's kind of one of the points that I try and make in my books and whatnot.
But I think that's because we live in a society, especially in the United States, where men are men and the women are women.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the men are macho, and they're the ones who are the strong one. And that's the society we live in, and it's always been I was brought up that way. You're the man, toughen up.
Right.
Have that stiff upper lip. You go forward. You're strong. You don't cry. You do all these things. And we do that as society. We I don't know, Pat. I'm sure it's the same in Australia.
The way I was raised.
We're the same over here, James. Yeah, it's I grew up in the similar world to yourselves. I often think about my grandchildren now. They're aged in their low ages, and you think, I wonder if my grandfather thought about me at that age, that I'd be the same, but yeah, it's tough, and I noticed in Australia as well as in America, all this things in the church have come to bear, and like this happened. What abuses me, being an ex-police officer, is you know these things happened like 40 or 50 years ago, and yet they're bringing it up now, which is good for society because it sort of brought the cream to the top. But the thing is to prove their guilt. That's the biggest thing I find.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wish you well writing about all that sort of. It's wish you real well.
And that's the trigger, I think, when it hits you personally, when you have a stake in something, that's the trigger for most authors, I think.
That's where they create their niche.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whether it be that physical trauma that we've been talking about or something that is emotional for them, be it child abuse, physical abuse, political abuse, whatever is emotional for them, they internalize it. The author bring it out in a written form or in the Kindle form or audio form.
I'm the exception.
No, you're right in with everybody else. You're everybody else.
Because, I don't write. And a lot of times I write from dreams.
There you go. You internalized
So,
it. It was emotional, and that's your trigger.
So the book literally comes from it.
I do that too, James. I dream about all these things before I write. It drives me mad sometimes. You got to get out of bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and just write what
That's me too.
about.
Yeah, I'm up in the morning.
Is there no what
anything-
if?
No what?
No what if
Conscious.
sitting around and thinking, well, what if?
No, I think the way I dream is that I'll actually dream an entire book, as far as how it's laid out, in one dream in a night, and then I'll get up and write the outline down. So there is no what ifs for me because I've answered the dream. I've actually answered the book, the ending, the beginning, the ending, the middle, all of it's there.
Wow.
Now there's no characters, like you'll only have 2 or 3 characters. The Emblem, my first novel, was based on a dream, and there were 3 characters in that dream. So obviously I had to go back to the drawing board, and I had to figure out how to make this story plausible and why it happened. You have to add characters to make it happen. 3 people can't. There's rare that you would just have 3 characters in a book.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some out there, but certainly in a play you can have 1.
Yeah.
But so that's what's also interesting about what we do is because as writers, you take what you have sometimes, and you can create this huge world from something as simple as a dream.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I actually, and I am all over the place. My science fiction novel, it was on a dream. The Emblem was based on a dream. All these, except for a children's story, they were based on dreams. So,
Wow.
And it sounds like, Pat, you said you dreamed the whole story also.
I do, yeah, Gene. Because I'm sort of lucky that I live in the bush. I got bush all around me, so I sit outside and I look out the window and I can see bush, and my imagination just takes up the scene of what I'm going to write about. But like James said before, I wrote a book called Confessions of an Alcoholic, and I got to a point where I knew what I wanted to say, but I just couldn't get the words right in the book that I wanted. And anyway, 2 o'clock one morning, I woke up and there it was. And so I sat down in my pajamas and finished the book. And I just went to the computer and bang, and it all just come together exactly the way I wanted it. And I dreamt about it. I dreamt it was so. And this latest book I'm writing, because it's so, I suppose, being an ex-detective and being all those, having that mind, and thoughts and all that, I'm dreaming about it all the time. I dream about every scene, and then I come home, and get up in the morning and start to type, and it's all there. It just flows out of me. It's incredible, and I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I just
because a lot of people are disciplined writers. They sit in front of the computer 2 hours a day, and they force themselves to work on something.
Oh, I can't.
Okay, I have a question, Pat. The murder in 1907, was it solved in 1907?
Yeah, it was solved. Yeah, it was solved. But the big thing is, in the book, it's also solved, but in a different way.
Yeah.
It's so it's not sort of the exact way it was solved, this fellow was out pigeon shooting and he shot this woman and killed her. But it's a little bit different. I got a few twists and turns in there to make it more authentic, and all that. So, and it's a bit of a love story involved in it, and you just let your imagination run wild sometimes.
Pat, I'm having a hard time following. It's a love story where she gets shot while the guy's out pigeon shooting.
Sex, violence, and intrigue. Ooh, I love the story.
If that's love, I don't want to know about it.
Yeah.
Worse, it was a pea shooter.
Okay.
So they only had a small slug, and they're the little factors that I got to make sure I get right,
All
but
right.
yeah, no, I go there. I'm like you, James. I dream about it, and then I sit down and away I go, and I sort of use a lot of dialogue. I like using dialogue because I think that's more. It's more telling the story in a face-to-face type of thing. But I don't put much descriptive words in my books. I find that, when I read descriptive stuff, it annoys me, So I don't put it in. I leave out all the colour of the shirts and all that dresses and all that sort of stuff. And I had one lady she got back to me after she read the sheer and she said, I seen that person. He had a checkered shirt on and everything, and I didn't mention a thing about him.
I had that happen with the emblem. I had someone say, I've been to that country, and I made that country up.
There you go. There you go.
All right, Pat, we're running out of time, so why don't you tell us real quickly where we can learn more about you and your work?
Oh, right. Okay. If they look at my website, www.patritter, PATRITTER.com.au, and everything's there. And what I've done, James, is under About Me, I've put your these interviews we have.
Oh, thank
So
you.
people can,
I actually went to your site and saw it, yeah.
Great.
I got the first one on the front page of my website, but if you go to About Me to read my story on how I become an author, then I've got the others I've got there, and that way they're a continuation of our interviews.
Well, thank you.
And that's it.
I appreciate that. And Paul, where can we learn more about you?
Paul-Atreides.com.
Okay. And
the interview we did last year,
uh-huh.
I had on my website, and then the website got hacked in August.
It wasn't me.
Last year, and it took me 3 months to get the website back up.
Wow.
I don't think the interview is there anymore.
Yeah. And Jan?
www.janetcorsi.com and always on aspectsofwriting.com.
And Joyce?
Yes. I have my blog, which is linesoflisteningblog.wordpress.com. And since I'm an RN, it's devoted to health and wellness. And I also have linesoflistening.com, which is where you can get my books. And everything is also available on Amazon.
Yeah. Pat, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't know.
You're on Amazon too, right?
I'm on Amazon and Smashwords, yeah, and Facebook and LinkedIn and
okay,
Instagram,
Twitter, and
any things.
We can find you for sure, right?
Yay, rah.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank.
Google.
Okay, I'd like to thank our guests Paul Atreides and Pat Ritter, along with my co-host Janet K. Gatchenberger Joyce K. Gatchenberger and Janet Corsi. I'm mixing you two up. To find links to our guests, please visit my website at aspectsofwriting.com. That's aspectsofwriting.com. And you can also find the video of our past shows as well as the archived audio. If you can also find us on. Yeah, you can find us on amfm247.com. We're also on Roku TV, YouTube, and the 14 terrestrial stations are also listed on that site, aspectsofwriting.com. So just go to aspectsofwriting.com and click on the archive tab.
Excellent.
Until next week, this is your host, James Kelly, reminding you, if you can dream it, you can write it. Thank you, everyone.
Somehow we
Thank
lost
you.
Pat.
Thank you.